My name is Jim Wallace, and for 4 years I was what's referred to as a philanthropy officer in the major gifts department there at CAP, which basically meant I would travel the United States for 26 weeks a year, meeting with individuals and sometimes organizations who often were enduring CAP supporters. And I would investigate the chance that they might become an even deeper supporter. I was at a conference, the Kentucky Nonprofit Association, and I sat next to a CAP employee who was a really nice young woman, and I told her what I did, and she said, "Have you ever thought about working for a Christian organization like CAP?" And I hate to say this, I had to ask her what CAP was. I wasn't sure what the Christian avalanche. I mean, I sort of had a vague awareness of it, but and she invited me to come over and learn more about it, whether I applied or not. And I wound up and I thought, this is really cool. What they do is empowered by their faith, and it's a profound impact upon a people in a region. I thought, I'd like to be associated with this. And so at age 58, with no real hope that they'd pick me, because I thought, man, I'm too old, man. They won't go for a guy like me. And I got the job. It was just, the stars aligned, you know. It was really cool, really cool. Another one of the serendipitous things, before I ever knew that much about CAP, the only contact I'd ever had with CAP was two ways. One, they do a state government employee fundraising campaign. And I'd seen some of their literature and met one of their gift officers. But I was at an awards banquet for Kentucky's Nonprofit Association eons ago. And I was at a table, and there was this priest there, an elderly priest, sort of shock of white hair, sort of a portly guy. And it was Ralph Binding. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know anything about him. And I don't even remember what we talked about. He's a guy of definite opinions. That was my impression of him. And I think as I got into CAP and got to know CAP employees, they sort of affirmed that Father Ralph sort of knew what he wanted, knew where he was going, and you got on board. You know, you leaped on board and you went with it. And just in having that banquet meal at his table, that was the vague sense that I got. Here's a guy who, by force of will, has made things happen. He got some big award. I've forgotten the name of it. That's when I sort of realized, oh, this is some guy. He's special. When I got connected with it, it had its headquarters in the Lexington office. And they had just moved into this brand new office facility. And there was construction going on and all kinds of things happening because the building had really only been partially occupied. And there was a high level of energy there. They were in the middle of a campaign called the Moving Mountains Campaign, where they were raising one of the largest amounts of money that they had ever raised up until that time. And so there was a lot of focus on getting people out in the field and getting connected to donors. And so the evidence of faith was just everywhere, you know. People were living their beliefs. And when you're around people who live their beliefs, it's very empowering. So I landed at like the perfect time. The gift program was growing and growing, and resources were ever increasing, and there was purpose and direction and success. It was just really cool. At that time, many people had only sort of a vague awareness of CAP. I grew up in Jefferson County, and there's like this invisible force field around Jefferson. They don't know what's going on in the state, and I did not know much about the Appalachians. So yeah, I started commuting every day, and then I had a bigger learning project, which was to really learn what Appalachia was and who its people were and what it was like. I had no idea. There was 13 states, 1,000 miles long, millions of people. And so even though I was just down the road, the journey I had to make was like a 1,000-mile journey of understanding. They are an enduring people who have seen exploitation and hardship, but they tend to overcome simply by being resilient. And once you become part of their community, you're just family. And to see that in action, you know, was really eye-opening to me. I would fly down I-75, never getting off, you know, and then once you go into the mountains and you see and experience it, you don't want to drive down. You want to go and be where the people are and where the beauty of the Appalachians is just incredible. It gave me a deep sense of purpose and satisfaction to feel that I was a small part of feeding, clothing, and housing people and bringing them hope and transforming lives and sharing Christ's love with them. It was a very purposeful job that brought you a great deal of joy. Plus, the people you were working with were absolutely the best people, and also the people you were serving, the participants, and the folks who were making it all possible, the donors. So it's like this perfect trifecta of being surrounded with very positive people, no matter whether they were volunteers or staff or participants or donors. They were focused on the same thing, which is really, really rare. And to be surrounded in that kind of environment was just incredible, really, really was. Particularly the CAP people, Guy Adams, executive director, president, very much concerned not just the professional side of his staff's life, but their personal success. And there's a real emphasis on trying to address you as a person 360 degrees. And I learned so much about how to be a better family man and, things that really had nothing to do with me soliciting gifts for CAP, but were really important to my success in my family life and my community life. When I first started there, the way that they would introduce, if you didn't grow up in the mountains, what they would do is they would take you into the mountains. You'd have a veteran staff member, and you'd go and you'd meet participants. You might go to a food pantry and work. You might participate in the hunger march down there. I rode down into the Eagle area, which is close to the Tennessee border. And I was with a veteran staff CAP member by the name of Liz James, and we picked up an occupational therapist. And we were doing a home visit to a single mom and her daughter. And the daughter was like 5, little blonde-headed girl. You know how they are, a high-energy little girl. And the therapist was working on neuromuscular coordination and other kinds of things. And you could just see the stress pour off that woman, just the relief when the therapist was getting there and working with her child and supporting not just the child, but her. She wasn't alone in this thing. And it was palpable to see the kind of transformation it was bringing to her life, just to have that therapist coming in. I think it was every other week or something like that. And so I thought, man, this is joyful. And so we're leaving, and we're all in the car, Liz and the therapist and myself, and the therapist said, this is a tough situation. This little girl has a genetic disorder that is terminal. She is not going to live much longer. It's something to do with the gray and white matter in her brain sort of attacking each other. And I thought, oh my goodness, here we were in this most stressful of situations that had to be crushing to her mother. And for CAP not only to do something that even temporarily would make that little girl's life a little better, and to support that mother in the most desperate of circumstances. As a parent, it's just crushing. And I thought, this is the kind of organization that I'm proud to be with, man. They're in there not just when people are at their best, but sometimes when they're at their most desperate. And they're bringing them hope and transformation, just like the mission statements. And that stuck with me, that stuck with me a lot. Mm-hmm. A lot of other stories. I'm driving in the car. I get a call from Guy Adams. And he said, Jim, are you seated? And I said, yeah, I'm seated. I better be. I'm in my car. And he said, we have just received the largest gift of stock that CAP has ever received. And I said, well, it must be one of these high-profile donors or something. Nope, he said, this guy been giving us $30 a year for 20 or 30 years. And it turned out it was a very elderly gentleman in rural Pennsylvania. And that was one of my territories. I, at one time, had 14 states or sections of states, and I went to his area, and the guy said, you need to get up there. And I want you to meet this guy, and let's learn about his story and what's going on. And so I went up there, and he had retired there. His wife was deceased, and he was by himself. He had a caregiver. he was very close to death. And he wanted to do something transformational for children and youth. And he said, when I grew up, I spent way too much time looking down at my feet. I want these kids to look up toward the horizon and to have the resources to help them think about their futures. And I got to thinking, oh my God, here's this guy who, he could be doing all kinds of things. He's near the end of the final chapter of his life, but he's thinking about these kids. And I had several visits with him that were just incredible and uplifting. And the gift was, I believe, in excess of $400,000. It was an unbelievable gift. One time I went to visit him, and I'm sort of obsessive compulsive, so I'm following my GPS. And all of a sudden the roads become gravel roads. And I thought, well, there's a lot of gravel roads. What's a big deal? But what should have given me the tip-off was when the gravel became these big round creek stones. I think, well, you don't really drive over. And then the creek stones became mud. And I thought, well, I'm only a mile from his house. And surely this will be okay. And I'm going over this big mountain. And all of a sudden, I sink right up to the hubcaps in mud. I'm in the middle of nowhere on a mountain in Pennsylvania. And the car's not going to go back. It's not going to go forward. And I'm stuck. And I had taken, without knowing it, or realizing it, or being smart enough to question my GPS, I had taken a logging road. And it was a non-maintained logging road. And so I'm on this hilltop in the middle of nowhere. And the car has sunk into the ground. And I thought, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And all of a sudden, coming from the opposite direction of this logging road, is one of these big four-wheel drive trucks with the extended tires. It's what they call a dually with two wheels in the back. I thought, I'm saved, I'm saved. It was a bunch of deer hunters. And after they stopped laughing at me, literally laughing at me, they said, you know, what are you doing on this road? And I said, well, I'm a little bit lost. and here's what they said. We go deer hunting, and we don't get much chance to go deer hunting, so we're going to deer hunt. And if you're still here at the end of the day when we're done deer hunting, we might pull you out of here. And I said, well, that's very thoughtful of you. And they drove off and left me there. And so I did manage to get enough cell signal. I got a hold of the local police, and they sent this super-duper high-powered tow truck to come get me. And after the deer hunters had driven off, I was really depressed. So as a gift officer, you always take little bags of stuff that's emblematic of Appalachia, you know, just little, very minimally, no cost to it. So a lot of times I would take candies from Kentucky. And I was so depressed, I ate all the candy out of all the bags. So I was buzzing on a sugar high, and I'm trapped out of mouth. And the guy comes with a tow truck, and he pulls me out of there and gets me back on the road. Thank goodness I hadn't damaged the car. And I get to the donor's house, and I told him what I did, and he was amazed. He said, Jim, nobody travels that road. What were you doing? I said, I was sort of lost, Bill. And he said, well, I'm glad you got here. And so I've had my low moment. That was a low moment, and a silly moment. And I don't mind telling funny stories on myself, you know. I've met with some really inspiring people. I used to meet with some folks down in Alabama, and they owned an international business in office products. She was 94, and he was 99. And they were the most spiritual people I have ever met in my life. And he, at 99, would go into the office every day. He'd put a suit on and go down to the office. And she had been a Bible study teacher forever and a day. And as I got to know them a little bit, they were very philanthropic, and they made a very nice gift to one of our youth camps. And so the lesson to me was that as a philanthropy officer, just because somebody hasn't written a 5-figure or a 6-figure check, or you don't know where an individual's compassion is going to lead them or what their resources might be. I went into a home one time, and this is in central Ohio, and the wife was blind, absolutely blind. And she had gone blind over a 4-day period. Some type of autoimmune disease struck her optic nerves. And from a Thursday to the Tuesday of the next week, I think it was, she went from being totally sighted to totally blind, irreversible. And her husband was also elderly. They were in their 80s at the time. And but he was just the most positive guy. And so we sat down. Another gift officer had preceded me, and he had planted the seed with him. Have you thought about what you'd like to do in your way of estate planning, for a gift, maybe for a planned gift? And they had thought about it. And by gosh, by golly, they committed to Cap what ultimately became over a $500,000 planned gift. And being around these people who, again, just like the guy in Pennsylvania who had severe respiratory problems, physically they were incredibly challenged, but mentally and spiritually they were the most open and free people that you could imagine. And I drew real energy off of interacting with people like that. It's just incredible. I always felt the authenticity, the genuineness of Cap's philosophy that a staff member, a volunteer, a participant, a donor, they're all on the same, they're all on the same level. You were all part of the same organization. You were treated the same way, the respect. There was just a genuineness about CAP and the way it approaches its relationship and relationship building. And a lot of organizations talk that way, but they don't work that way. And CAP walks the talk, to use a cliche. And that is very uplifting and very, very rare. Like I said, I felt blessed that CAP, no pun intended, was the capstone of my career. To go out after having experienced an organization like that and to enter into retired life, it just doesn't get any better, it just really doesn't. There is more positive progress going on in Appalachia and the region now than in many, many, many years. And so as CAP transforms itself in response to that transformation in Appalachia, it's hard to guess what are going to be. There'll always be folks needing food, clothing, and housing, safe, warm, dry housing. There'll always be youth who are transformed by their exposure to the camp and the youth programs. So there are some bedrock things that I think are going to go forward no matter how Appalachia evolves. But it's going to be exciting to see how CAP evolves in response to the region's transformation. I'm really optimistic about Appalachia. You just see what's going on there now, and it's so encouraging. That was always a challenge when you were dealing with donors. They said, Jim, I feel like I'm throwing my money down a hole. Are things ever going to get better there? And the answer to that, my friend, is they are already getting better. New jobs, new industries, new transportation networks opening up. The potential of Appalachia is just incredible, and it's being realized. It will be realized within our lifetimes, I think. Because of CAP, I traveled the entire United States. At the height of my assignment of different regions, I had 14 different states or parts of states. So I experienced a lot of the United States. I experienced the kindness, compassion, and passion of donors, many who had never been to the region, never would get there. They're never going to set foot in the Appalachian Mountains. But their passion, it's just really good. When you get the chance to be around people of passion, compassion, and faith, you should never pass on the opportunity, because it will transform you and your perspective on life. And I think that's what CAP did for me. To see faith as a vibrant thing, not as a Wednesday or a Sunday thing, it's important. Of a career that spanned 40 years, raising money and doing other things, it was and is the highlight of my professional career. Nothing I did in the way of philanthropy ever came close to matching the satisfaction that I got as a philanthropy officer at CAP. That's just the truth of it, you know. It was transformational to me professionally and personally.